All right. So we have a few people. Hi. Melissa says hello. All right. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And then we will, we're going to have some more friends join us throughout the evening. But I just want to say thank you so much for being here tonight on a Friday night. I know that there's no other place you'd rather be than spending time here with myself and Leigh and Jeff on a very important topic. We are all excited to be here and look out for our kids. My kids have 4 legs, but so thank you for being here at Friends for Life Fall 2021. We are so excited to have you here. So my name is Matt Point. I am the Director of Advancement here at Children with Diabetes. I am married to a type 1. So, type 1 is very much part of my life that I see and experience every day, day in and day out. Just as a friendly reminder, so Leigh and Jeff are going to chat with us for a little bit, and then we're going to go into a Q&A portion. So feel free as they're talking, if you've ever had a question about what you could do for your kid, or if you've experienced something and you want to see how other people have experienced, pop it into the chat or share it in the Q&A, because we're going to go into a Q&A section at the end, but feel free to share them with us in the chat or in the Q&A. If you'd like to ask anonymously, you can send the message directly to me through the Q&A or through the chat, or you can ask questions anonymously through the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. So with me tonight, I am fortunate and lucky to introduce two of my favorite people, Leigh Fickling and Jeff Karitis. Collector of orange and green wristbands, Leigh Fickling is the executive director of the Disability Management System at Duke University and Health System. With over 20 years of higher education administration experience, Leigh is an expert in college and workplace accommodations for individuals with disabilities. As a former solo legal practitioner, Leigh's law firm specialized in education law, disability law, and family law. Leigh is a mom to twins, Ava, green band, and Davis, orange band, and can be most often found in the FFL hallway shouting, "Slow down!" Leigh feels that FFL is the #1 most important tool in her diabetes toolkit and can't imagine trying to diabeat this without the strong support from her Friends for Life. FFL conferences are the highlight of the year for the Fickling family, and they can't wait to welcome new and returning families to their circle of friends. Hashtag green and orange for life. Also with us tonight, we have Jeff Karitis. Jeff is a senior vice president of wealth management and portfolio manager in New York City. He holds the CFP, which is Certified Financial Planner Professional, and CEPA, Certified Exit Planner Advisor designations. He has been providing wealth management strategies for business owners, executives, and families since 1999. Jeff previously served as an analyst at Merrill Lynch Investment Banking, a consultant for Merrill Lynch Alternative Investments, and a special assistant to the CFO and CEO of a major children's book publisher and entertainment company. Jeff earned his Bachelor of Science degree in Finance and Marketing from University of Albany, State University of New York. Jeff, his wife Kimberly, daughter Madeline, son Max, and retired racing greyhounds, Ginger and Marshall, live in Hudson Valley, New York. He serves as co-president of the JDRF Westchester Fairfield Hudson Valley chapter on the board of directors of Temple Beth Jacob, and is the chair of the Jewish Federation of Orange County Endowment Committee. Jeff's daughter, Madeline, was diagnosed with T1D in 2014. They've been attending CWD and Friends for Life since 2016. He and his wife are passionate about improving the lives of people with diabetes, and they support various local and global diabetes charities. So, Jeff and Leigh, I called you Kim, that's so funny. Jeff and Leigh, thank you so much for being here tonight. I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Sounds good, Matt. I feel like with those introductions, we should just say thank you all for coming tonight. Good night. That was a great introduction. Appreciate you, Matt, for introducing us. And we look forward to being with you all. First of all, can we just give a big, gigantic shout out to Sasha, who created this little cartoon version of Leigh and Jeff on the screen that you see in front of us right now with our kids, Maddie and Ava. That if you can't figure out, that's me on the right-hand side of your screen. That's Jeff on the left-hand side of your screen with Ava and with Maddie. And we're so happy that you all are with us here tonight to talk about advocating for your child. I'm Leigh Fickling. Like Matt said, there I am virtually on your screen. I so wish that we could have been together in White Plains this past month, but I'm happy to be with you virtually. This is my family, Jimmy, that's Ava and Davis, and that's Ava's diabetes alert dog, Batman, not paying attention to the photographer and not following along like he was supposed to for the family Christmas card photo. So our connection to diabetes is that Ava was diagnosed with type 1 when she was 3 years old. You certainly cannot tell from that picture, as she is now taller than I am, as a gigantic 12-year-old. She has now had diabetes for about 9 years. And our connection to CWD, like Matt said, really goes back to day one of diabetes for us when we were in the hospital on the night of diagnosis. And in that moment, you know, when we were alone, feeling like we were never going to be the same, the very first thing that we did, probably like many of you did, was go to the internet and look for answers. And the answer that we found was in a Google search for, of all things, children with diabetes. And we found the organization Children with Diabetes. And we've been attending Friends for Life for many, many years, both at the regional conferences across the country and the yearly conference in Orlando. So that's our connection to CWD and Friends for Life. As Matt said, I am an attorney, and I'm really going to talk with you tonight about sort of advocating for young adults, advocating for older children, advocating for employment accommodations, higher ed accommodations. And I'm going to let Jeff talk with you a little bit about advocating for younger children, just so that way we're able to kind of cover all of the spectrum. So you get all of your questions answered tonight, hopefully, and we don't leave anything sort of unturned that's out there.
Great. Well, I'm Jeff Karitis. Thank you for the introductions, Matt and Leigh. That was very thorough. We have to probably update some of it too. But it's, my daughter, Maddie, was diagnosed in January of 2014 in a very dramatic fashion. And from that point on, it changed our lives in such a major way. We found CWD, Friends for Life, in 2015, really. So not right away, but and my son was born in 2015 in May. So that just wasn't gonna work for us that year, although we didn't realize babysitting was a part of it, which is one of our favorite things for Orlando, at least from from 1-year-old to 6-year-old, or 5, sorry, we'll fix that one. But, when we went there, we did go in 2016 the first time, and we bribed our daughter that we took her to Walt Disney World first. And we had an extra day and we never went back. And that's kind of our connection. And we just found our tribe right away. It was the first place we felt comfortable leaving Maddie. At, I guess 5.5 years old now, or 6, maybe 6.5. And so that it just felt like very quickly we found our tribe, and that it was the right place for us, and going through that. When we talk about advocacy and we talk about how important it is, I think, you look at this and some obvious things, 504s, having strong 504s, it could be challenging. It could be challenging, and it depends on where you are and what school you're in. And so it's really important to try to make what I would say, the administrators, the teachers, make friends with them and make them get them on your side as quickly as you can. It's much easier than having to fight all the way up. So a lot of it, and we look at that and how to really be there for your child and let them know how important it is, but also to let them be a child, and to their child who has T1D. T1D is not who they are, but we want them to be able to live fully and really fully experience their education, and not T1D take them off of that as much as possible. And that's, in terms of dealing with that, that's hard at first, right? At a 4.5-year-old or a 7.5-year-old, Maddie's now 12, she's actually proven to advocate for herself of late, that we've had some experiences like that. But I'll tell you, when we first started, the school district did not work with us. but we were able to convince them that was the best thing for them to work with us, and not just for Maddie, but for other kids with T1D. But it's something, there's a lot of resources out there, and it's working through that and figuring out which ones can connect and work for your family and for that school district, which is not always so simple. And I would say I don't know, I don't want to step into that, Leigh. You think we should go into some of the key things, and when we're looking at 504s or for a child or anything?
I think so. I'll talk just 1 minute, just about some key things that I'll point out also. I think that, one of the things that's come up in my work world, and one of the biggest things that I want to be able to pass on to the 28 of you that are with us right now, and then all of you that we know are going to come back and listen in the future to the video replay, is this idea of the word disability. And so in my professional world, I get asked this question a lot, and sort of, is the word disability a bad word? Is that a word that we should refrain from using? And, even my son Davis had a situation recently to where one of his teachers asked him, did he call another set of students, disabled? And so, when he was confronted with that question, he said, well, perhaps I did, but that's not a bad word. And so I think if you really hear anything that we say tonight, the message that I want to be able to arm all of you all with, the biggest piece of advocacy, the tool that I could give you to put into your diabetes toolkit, is the word disability is not a bad word. And that is the word that will protect you. So, you are protected under the Americans with Disabilities Act and under Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act as a person with a disability because of type 1 diabetes. And I know that word sometimes can mean different things to different people. And I'm not suggesting that we use that word as a crutch for us to be able to sort of take the easy way out of something. That's definitely not what I'm saying. But what I'm telling you is that, the word disability is defined under the laws as a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits a major life activity. So that's not Leigh's definition of disability. That's not Jeff's definition of disability. That's in the law. And so when you think about that in terms of diabetes and what that means to you and your families and your children with diabetes, or yourself as a young adult or an adult with diabetes, you have a physical impairment of a major bodily function. And that major bodily function is your endocrine system. It's not working properly, and you are protected under the ADA, and that is a civil rights law. And, you really sort of need to use that basis for your advocacy. And so when Jeff is talking about Section 504 plans, and when we talk about finding your voice and using your voice for advocacy to stand up for the rights of your children or to stand up for the rights of yourself as a young adult, you have to use that as your baseline. And so, again, like Jeff said, going into advocacy and setting up your plans in your educational system, in your after school activities, in your extracurricular activities, whatever it is that you happen to be wanting to do, or even in the employment sector, go into it knowing that you are entitled to these rights as a person with a disability, and you are to be free from discrimination because of that. And so I think that you really do sort of need to wrap yourself around the word disability and know that that's not a bad word. Not be afraid to say that, and know that you really do sort of have to link onto that in order to be able to start to advocate for your child and to speak up for what's needed. So again, that's going to be really important for what Jeff is talking about for younger children, what you're going to need to think about as those younger children like Maddie and Ava get ready to transition to high school, as students transition from high school into college, and then as they transition to young adults to be able to go out into the employment world as well. Again, the definition of diabetes, and disability does not change. Their needs will change in terms of accommodations, and it's not, diabetes does not look the same. When Ava was diagnosed when she was 3 years old, literally Jimmy and I would have to lay on top of her, to change her Dexcom or to change her pod or to change her site. Most of the time now at 12, we do not lay on top of her, although there are times that I feel like maybe we might. But it changes over time. And so too do the needs for accommodations. And so the advocacy language changes over time, and you have to sort of adapt that. But I think that, really, truly, that again, if you're really going to get anything, at least from Leigh's lawyer words of advice, is that sort of wrapping your head around that this is a civil rights law. You are entitled to protection from discrimination. And you really do have to sort of know that that begins with the definition of disability, and that you meet that definition under the law because of the function of the endocrine system. So again, it's not that we're trying to use diabetes as an excuse to not do things. It's the fact that your body is not working properly. And then also tagging on, if you have other conditions as well, like we talk about, at Friends for Life when we're in real life and having conferences. If you have other things, learning disabilities, ADHD, other types of disabilities that go along with that, you would add those on. So there may be times when you have a 504 plan, when you also have an IEP. So there may be two different plans that are going on at the same plan at the same time that would entitle you to different accommodations. So that's just a little bit of legal information for you to impress your friends at party. And now I'll turn it back over to Jeff.
No, I think, when we, I'm not a lawyer, right? And so that was, a lot of this was new to us. And there were organizations and Children with Diabetes website. I think COPA is another one that was helpful for us. And I listened to a podcast that they have a lot of things that helped us and things that we put into our 504. I would say one thing, and this is theirs, right? The name of the podcast is called Juicebox Podcast. Scott Benner, and he has a website. If you look up his pro tips, they give you this formats: ADA, CWD, JDRF. They all have different types of resources, and it's important to seek them out. But I would say one of the key things is to make sure you, like for our daughter, she's looping, so it's important to have her phone or her watch as a medical device. And it's also important to have that the parents have the final say in their treatment. Some of these people there are things that they may interpret in how the doctor has to write things that you want to have an override ability in that. For us, that's worked out nicely. And we haven't had to really enforce it. Although we had a case just the other day where a teacher did discriminate against our daughter and said she couldn't use her phone. And the teacher didn't read her 504. We talked to the guidance counselor. The guidance counselor spoke to the teacher, and that was taken care of. We are in a school district that is very supportive of us, which they weren't always supportive. And so, that it's important that you have a strong 504 and to make sure you keep it up. And I think one of the things I learned from another person was go through the 504 as they get older and give back things, if you will, right? Things you don't need anymore really is sometimes a nice, like a give and take. We've been very fortunate. Our first instance was not so fortunate. We had to fight. We had to hire an advocate, and we had to do that. And then, so I would say we're pleasantly persistent. That's really when you're advocating, you try to be pleasant and approachable and a kind person until you can't be anymore. And that has to, right? That's a takeaway. And I would say one of my other things for just in general with diabetes is stop, drop, and roll. Fires come, don't let them take you out. Find your way to get back up. And our goal is to teach our daughter, our children, to be advocates for themselves in the end. So as we teach them now, we have seen some of the fruits of that of late, where she advocated for herself, and we're really pleased with that. So I think that's not something that happens overnight. At 5 or 6 or 7 or 9, perhaps she wouldn't have. But it's something you want to work on and think about what are the right words to be using for people who are not educated in diabetes. Right? We were not educated in diabetes when Maddie was diagnosed, and my uncle had it. I didn't know much about it. But you get into that, and that's where I would say for children and looking at that and focus on the resources and reach out to. We're all very. I know you can probably find me, I'm sure, and Leigh, and if there's things like that you're going through to help. So.
Yeah, and I think, it's important to, when we think about these laws that sort of govern the rules of accommodations and govern sort of how our children, exist in these educational systems, Section 504 comes from Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. So do you think that people were looping in 1973? They were not. That wasn't even around then. And so, when I do training with our managers and our supervisors at work, and when I work with other individuals and we talk about, how we have a need to be flexible with these plans, there's not, people want things to be very cut and dry, and they want to be able to sort of follow a rule book. And so what they're looking for is like a diabetes playbook. And, Jeff and I both have 12-year-old daughters, but they are very different people. And so the diabetes rule book for 12-year-old girls is probably different, even though they're both girls. They both have diabetes. We both go to Friends for Life. That's probably the end of the similarities when it comes to the way that they're managing their diabetes right now. But there's a very high probability that the school systems would like to put them on a plan that would match. And so one of the important things, as you think about working with your school system, is that schools have a duty to be able to review your requests for accommodations on a case-by-case basis. And so we have to do an individualized assessment. And sure, they can certainly consider what they've done for other students with diabetes before, and they can use sort of past precedent of what's worked and what hasn't worked, but they still have a duty to be able to review your child's medical condition, because maybe they have food allergies, maybe they have other medical conditions that go along with it, that's going to change the way that their diabetes affects them in the classroom, affects them in PE, affects them at recess, that may alter the way that that diabetes care plan looks in the classroom and at the school. And so I think that that's really important. So whenever you are meeting with the school system, one of the things that I think that you need to know is that it's okay not to accept the plan. It's okay to think about it. It's okay for you to review it. It's okay for you to take some time to be able to think about, is this really going to work for us? And I think that, you find yourself in a really hard place because you must trust these individuals to keep your child alive during the day. And so you walk a very fine line as a parent or as a caregiver of not wanting to make them mad, but also, wanting to stand up for your child and doing the right thing. And so I think that you have to walk that line. And like Jeff said, they ended up having to get an advocate to be able to help them. The resources that we've put onto the website are just a few resources. There are many, many other resources that are out there. Of course, CWD has an excellent page that has a lot of different resources about how to protect yourself. And so I think that that's a fine place for you to be able to start off sort of as a general overview about diabetes in the school system. Of course, our friends at the American Diabetes Association have great resources as well. They also have an advocacy program to where you can reach out and talk to someone if you feel like you face discrimination. The last two, one, the Office for Civil Rights, if you feel like you do want to file a complaint, and then the EEOC, if you are an employee and you feel like you have faced employment discrimination, those would be the two places where you would go and file complaints. So I've listed both of those on there, and this slide deck will be available to you once the conference is over with, so you'll be able to go back and look at that. So, know that sometimes you do have to file a complaint. And, certainly, Matt and I can tell you from working in higher ed for many, many years that it's often once a complaint is filed with the Office for Civil Rights, that's when change starts to happen. And, that it's unfortunate sometimes that it takes a complaint to go to that level. But I think that, you sometimes have to view a complaint in that level, that you're not only standing up for your own child, but you're also sort of standing up for the others that may be coming behind your child, or for the other people who don't have a voice enough to be able to speak up for themselves. But I think that, again, trying to be able to find a way not only to speak up for your child's rights immediately, and then, like Jeff said, helping your child find their own voice. And that's going to change over time. And, I think that starts with trying to help them create an elevator speech of explaining what their diabetes is, either to peers or to new teachers. Or, to a substitute teacher who comes in and who doesn't understand, maybe they weren't given a note that they're able to have unlimited bathroom access, or, access to food and drink at all times. Or the ability to remove their mask, to be able to have food and drink in the classroom. And if you have someone in who is not familiar with your plan, they may hit a hard stop. And so, when you're not there as a parent to be able to speak up for your child, that's when it's really important, even if your child is small, to teach them to be a little advocate for themselves and to be able to say, I have diabetes. Didn't you see the note? I have diabetes. You need to talk to the nurse. And even small children can say things like that. So I think that too is really important when we're thinking about finding our voice and finding ways to be able to speak up, on behalf of our kids, and teaching them to learn how to do that as well.
Yeah, we had a one-on-one aide for until last year, really. And so we were very fortunate that way. Perhaps we had the aide too long, but that was, but it is something you want to look at in your school district when you're looking. If there is anyone else getting one, you're eligible for it too, right? And I'm not familiar with if they're giving to one, they have to give to all. But sometimes you have to fight for that. And and it was really, and we had the same person from first grade to fourth grade. And that was pretty amazing to have. And she's a nurse, so she can give insulin too. So we were very lucky that way. But I think you have to teach them to fight for it. You have to realize, when something doesn't feel right, it probably isn't. And you just have to try to get to that initial conversation to the right people. And most of the time people have been receptive but sometimes they're not. And that's when we did have to bring in an advocate and an attorney, I guess, for a moment. But it was that actually once we did that, they changed their tune. So it's unfortunate. We had to pay for someone to come in, and our first meeting, they had 7 people in the meeting. It was my wife and I and 7 people from the school district. We're like, we just thought we were sitting down to talk about how you're going to help Maddie, through the school. We didn't realize you guys were like, it was very interesting. But that you learn from that, right? And now we teach them and hopefully others too, and how to take care of themselves and to make sure it's important. I worry about teenagers, right? I worry about the next stage where teenagers don't want people to know they have type 1, right? And they will, right? There's a word for that, where they won't, they'll go out treating, or they won't say if they're low during a test, and see that, where they'll they're afraid to be different. Right. And we have to teach them it's not about, it's about living your best life and being able to do everything. And if you have a low, you need to treat your low. If you're too high, you need to get some insulin, and the school needs to help you and give you accommodations for that, because it's important, and you can really derail your school career there, right? And your life, and not have, better to treat than not, right? So
I think it's really important. I think, another example, we're sort of in that phase now as we are moving from tweendom to teendom, to where we're moving from that. And, certainly in our own world, it was so much easier, not that diabetes is ever easy, but, when they're smaller, it's easy to be able to put a cute little avocado backpack on a child, load them down with 17 juice boxes, and strap it on them and say, this is your diabetes phone, don't ever open it, and sort of put all of these diabetes rules and restrictions on them because they really don't know any better. But then as they sort of grow up a little bit more and they become more aware of the diabetes, it changes a little bit. And so, our current example now is that Ava has a PE class that's called Core Ball. And I don't quite know what Core Ball is all about, but they use these giant exercise balls. And she describes it to me as labor ball exercises. And she says, it's like when you're having labor. Now she's 12, she's never been in labor, but this is how she's describing it. And so labor ball is happening in PE multiple times a week, and Ava wears her sight on her legs. And when she's doing these labor ball exercises, her tubing is too short. And, she clips her pump on her waistband. But because of the rolling back and forth on the giant labor balls, it's ripping the tubing out of her legs. And so we're at a moment of advocacy. Do we tell the PE teacher that we need to do something different? Do we need smaller labor balls? Do we need to alter the activity? How do we handle this? And so the way that Ava has chosen to handle it is to disconnect from her pump. And while that is not the ideal situation, that is how she is choosing to handle it right now. And so for that period of time while she's in PE, that is her best method for handling it. So she's sort of going free from the pump, free from the tubing. We're not having any sort of issues. And then once PE is over with, then she reconnects. It is absolutely freaking the nurse out, who will watch her continue to get higher and higher. And so we really are sort of having to readjust. And so I think, as I look at the list of participants that we have with us live here tonight, I see that many of you here are also sort of getting ready to be in this transition phase too. That as we move from elementary to middle school, and then as we think about moving from middle school to high school, that we just have to be aware that the plans that we've had in place are going to have to change. Whether it's the fact that our kids themselves are changing and getting older and growing up with diabetes, or whether it's the plans themselves need to be readjusted. And I think that we have to stay flexible. And I think Jeff had a great point before, really when I've gone into these meetings, I normally take snacks with me because people love snacks. They love to have a little gift. And I think that if you bring in a treat to them, maybe that will cause them to be nicer to you. But I also at the same time will say, that there are times, if you haven't made someone cry, then you're not doing it right. So I think that you have to be prepared, to truly use your voice and be the mama bear or the papa bear if you have to, and know that, again, you have the law on your side, and not to be afraid in that meeting to take the time to have a moment and say, I'm not ready to sign this today. And I think that, you are allowed to be able to take the time to step away, to say, I need to think about this a little bit more. I need to go off and, go to your car and cry, go to your car and Google, go call the American Diabetes Association, or, go call me if you need to. But I think that just don't feel the pressure to sign documents, to put a plan in place that's not going to work for you or your child, because I think that in the end is really just going to set yourself up for some disappointment and for some heartache on down the road. And so I think that is definitely not a great way to find your voice. That's a way to smother out your voice. And so there's no harm in asking for just a little bit of time before you sign off on those documents.
I think you say, like, you want to get them on your side, whoever it is, right? And right. I think that's important. If it's at your employer or if it's at school. I saw someone put on there on the chat, and I think it's most people want to help, and once they understand it, it's a lot of times it's just lack of understanding. People will say, oh, it's type 2 or this or that, things like that, and that's. As you say in the South, right? Bless their heart. And we try to teach them, you just try to not educate them. You want to bring them onto your team. And, we'd love to teach you about what it is we're doing. And we always have given resources to all of the people involved. And in a work environment, that can be challenging, I guess, too, right? It's also about, but I believe, and I'm not a lawyer again, I believe the law is on your side there too, right? In that if there's some basic needs, that alarms going off, kids, everyone hates that. You get to a certain point. We have a tile on my daughter's Orange Link. We're using Orange Link right now. And that kept going off, but she didn't tell me until like a week after. It was going off like during the day, and I didn't know it was going off. So you can mute it. But that's the thing, to find her stuff if she loses it. But it's about I think for everything, it's about communication, positive, trying to be positive, always try to understand where they're coming from and help them help you. That's really how, I think that's the first step. And before you have to get to if it has to go to the other place, I mean, then you have to step on their neck and do what you have to do. That's what you got to do, right? But the stepping on the neck should be down the road a little bit, is what I would say, right? Is that?
Yeah, I agree. We had a question that came in the question and answer portal that was talking about COVID restrictions at the school. And someone had a failed insulin pod and they had to report to the school to change it. And because of COVID restrictions, they had to change it in the parking lot. And so now that person is stating that they're going to call the principal to ask, whether they can change it in the school. And I mean, I would ask that. You're not saying, can I come in and bring Subway to my kid and eat lunch in the cafeteria, masks off and share germs? What you're doing is you're providing medical services that are life-saving to your child. So I think that is something that's really important, that the school is not changing the pod. And so because the school is not providing that service to you, you are having to do that as the parent. And so by them asking you to do that out in the car, that's not an ideal place to change the pod. I mean, we all know we can change a pod in the car. We can change a pod anywhere that we want to. But I think that, by relying on that for COVID as a restriction and saying that that's not a reason why you can come into the school, I think that is definitely something that I would go back to the principal to dispute and say that, this is a health and safety issue. Doing this in the car is not ideal, that you're willing to mask up to be able to go into the school. You'll wash your hands, you'll use hand sanitizer, whatever, the restrictions are, and again, you're not trying to necessarily violate the COVID visitation policy, but, not to turn this into Leigh's Legal Lesson 101, but, the purpose of an accommodation under the ADA is a modification of a policy or a practice. So what the school is saying, that because of COVID, we have visitor restrictions. That is our policy. And so what you are saying to the school is, I am asking you to modify this policy as an accommodation under the ADA because of my daughter's diabetes. And so those are the words that you want to use. And again, you're doing that out of the health and safety of your daughter, that you do not want to perform this medical procedure out in your car, that you need to do this inside of the school system. And I see that Matt has returned.
Awesomely. Thank you. And thank you, Jeff. We do have a couple questions. You already answered the one, but now's your time. If you do have any questions or situations you're thinking about that you'd like to bring up and just see how Jeff or Leigh would respond, now is your opportunity. One thing that I did see pop up was somebody said, I'm working on a certification exam for my job and currently fighting a battle if I'll be allowed to acknowledge cell phone alerts and eat or drink during the exam. I was diagnosed at 15, so I never did this as a kid, and I wish I had the experience of these accommodations. These are good skills for life. Leigh, I know that this is something you and I have discussed before. Do you have anything you'd like to share on that topic?
So one of the things that we do about testing accommodations for things that are standardized tests, and I'm not sure whether your test is a standardized exam or whether this is something internal with your company. One way that sometimes you can satisfy them, and this is one of the things that we do for like SAT, ACT, LSAT, MCAT, is to explain to the proctor of the exam that your phone is used to monitor your diabetes. And so that it is part of your diabetes medical management, and that you need the phone to be in the room with you while you are testing. It does not have to be on your person, but you need it to be at the desk of the proctor. And that you will have an alert set on so that if your blood sugar goes above a certain number or if it goes below a certain number, that it will alert you. And so that would be reasonable under the ADA. And, you know, we all know that you do not have to have it on you. It does not have to be by your side. You do not have to be looking at it at all times. So I think that that's the best approach to that. That you have that at the, you know, that if you do have to take it in a large testing environment with other testers, that you request to have the phone at the desk of the proctor, and that then you sit close to the proctor. So you would ask for priority seating near the proctor. And then in terms of the food or drink, if there's a way for you to request accommodations in advance, if this is a standardized test, you would put that in as an accommodation request. But if it's something that's more informal, then you would need to put that in informally to be able to explain that due to the nature of your health condition, you need to have access to food and drink at all times. The other thing that I would recommend that you would request, whether informally or formally in terms of standardized exams, would be an accommodation that we sometimes call stop the clock. It's not necessarily extended time. So, you know, if you have something like ADHD or a learning disability, you know, your person or you may have something called like extended time where you get time and a half on an exam. And that's due to your processing and your ability to sort of be able to, you know, think about the exam and for you to be able to answer the questions due to like a slower processing speed. What we're saying in the diabetes world is, you know, you may have a time, there may be a diabetes related incident that happens during the course of the exam to where you may have to stop the exam to either be able to treat a low blood sugar or treat a high blood sugar, or you may have to go to the bathroom for some reason, or when you go to the bathroom, your tubing may have gotten hooked on the door frame and now you may have to change your site. So because of that, you may need to stop the clock on the exam to deal with the diabetes related incident and treat it, deal with it, change the site, and then come back to the exam and not be penalized for that time. So when I'm thinking about sort of test taking accommodations for standardized exams when it comes to diabetes, whether that's SAT, ACT, any sort of graduate type exams or anything in the professional world, again, the ones that I would be thinking about is permission to have electronic devices with you, permission to have access to food and drinks as needed, restroom breaks as needed, and then sort of the stop the clock, you know, if needed to be able to address diabetes related incidents. And those would be the ones that I would have. And you really should not have a problem getting a note from your endo to be able to support those, because those really are sort of just generic diabetes related issues that could come up. So if somebody would ask for documentation to be able to support those requests, you should not have a problem to be able to get those. And if you want to email me once this is over with, let me know, and I'm happy to put that into words for you, just so that way you can have that, so you'll know what you're asking for.
Would they give a problem? Like Maddie runs most of her stuff off her watch. And so if she's on a test and she's starting to go low, we have overrides that she could put on her watch, and rather than have to go get her phone or get her phone out, she does all that. And I think that's interesting because, you know, obviously people can use a watch to cheat, and that's great. You know, it's very easy to do that, I guess, but it is a legitimate use, and we're trying to avoid the low or avoid the high, and it's just a quick thing. And so that's a little more challenging maybe to describe that, and it's not FDA approved yet. So we're working on that. So
I think that one's a little bit harder.
Yeah.
You know, we have it written into AVIS 504, the watch also, but we've not tried it yet with a standardized exam or any sort of end of grade testing or anything else, because she's not looping or open APS right now. So
Right.
I don't know how that would work, but we do have the watch written into it.
Yeah, make everything a medical device that you can.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And
So
if you
Jeff,
don't yeah.
sorry, question for you. So who would you say is your go-to person at the school? If something were to come up, you had a question, something were to change, who would you recommend as the person or has been your best advocate for you at your school?
It's interesting. In elementary school, the principal was really one of our key contacts there, and we had a great relationship with her. Now in middle school, it's the guidance counselor, who's been very really easy and to speak with and gets it. They seem to get it very, and the social workers really, right? So they seem to get that, and that's what they're there for. So I would think normally it would be the guidance counselor in the school, right? And we're very fortunate. The nurse wants to learn and know and do and is engaged. And I hope that's normal, but I fear it's not, right? So this one, where the nurse is an advocate who, she's not seeing the nurse often, but they are following her. We have that ability. But I would say your guidance counselor, try to connect. In the middle school, we've not really connected with the principal at all. It's been the other people, but in elementary, the principal was very engaged in that. So that was where we went through that.
Got it. Thank you. And as a reminder to everyone, if you do have any questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, issues, please pop them into the chat or the Q&A. Let me see. I want to make sure I didn't miss any. I saw something, but y'all had already answered it while we were talking. Lots of great info, lots of great info. One comment we do have from one of our friends up north here. I have an IEP, Canada, that my daughter has to have her blood sugar taken 10 minutes ahead of ed test and can't test if she's below 4 or above 10. Keep in mind, they use a different system in Canada. For when I worked at Friends for Life Canada, and the kid's blood sugar was 7.2, and I was like, I didn't get it. But that is an option as well, that I know that I, from a background in education as well, had a student who would not participate. I worked at an art school where they would do 6-hour-long courses that were pretty much lab-based, and you couldn't have food or drink inside. And so she had certain time breaks that she would leave to go that were already pre-built into the schedule for her. And that was something that she arranged beforehand, because she said 6 hours just too long to not. And they were spray painting in the room. You wouldn't want to eat in there anyway, but so she definitely knew what she wanted to get out of it, and what was going to work best for her as well. So
yeah, we have Maddie put her number before she takes any test. He actually asked her to put the number on that she is at that time, and then after someone had their hand raised.
Yeah, somebody has their hand raised. Are you all right, Margaret? I'm gonna allow you to chat. Are you ready? Do you have a question for us? You're on live. Or was it an accidental hand raise? All right. I'm going to go with accidental hand raise.
Okay.
Because it's down.
Yeah.
All right. Here we go. Are there any sample letters to requested accommodations for the ACT or SAT test, also for college housing with a kitchen?
I am sure that there are sample letters that are out there. No worries, Margaret. We were excited that you were about to join us. I am sure that there are sample letters out there, and I will try to find you one, Donna, if you will email me. I'm at lfickling@childrenwithdiabetes.com. I think Matt is typing. Maybe he can put that into the chat box for everybody. So college housing with kitchen. I'm going to go into Leigh's housing mode for just a moment. I think that, and I'm not sure why you're asking, but I'm going to assume that maybe there's a food allergy, or maybe it has to do with carb counting. Those are going to be my two assumptions that I'm thinking that your reason for asking for this. One of the things that I would say, regardless of whether it has to do with food allergy or carb counting, is before you start to go to college, I would encourage you to set up meetings with a lot of people before you go. I think you need to meet with the disability office before you go. I think you need to think about, you need to register with them. I think you need to meet with student health if there's a student health on campus, because I think that you need to figure out, who does your child need to see? If there's a diabetes related issue, do they go to student health? Do they go to the emergency room? Do they go to urgent care? Do they need to call home? So I think that they're a key partner, a stakeholder that you need to meet with. I think that dining services is another person that you need to meet with. And I think it's very important if you're dealing with food allergies. And certainly, from the places where I've worked before, I've worked in 4 different, major universities in the past. And I think that, one of the things that you have to watch out for is labeling, whether that's labeling because of a food allergy or labeling even with carb counts. And the way that you can sort of stress your importance, that it's important for labels to be accurate, is by meeting with dining services. And, I can tell you that oftentimes labels cannot be accurate. And, people in dining want to do the right thing for their students. And when they know that they have students that have medical conditions like diabetes, like celiac, like food allergies, they really do want to try to help with customized plans. And, they want to try to figure out a way to allow students to eat on campus, to be with their peers. So I think that even though you want to have a kitchen, as an accommodation, I still would encourage you to think about meeting with dining services, just so that way, if your child does want to eat with their peers on campus, they can know where the safe places are for them to be able to eat, and what are the safe foods for them to be able to eat. But then in terms of the kitchen as an accommodation, along with any other accommodations you're going to be asking for. So the way that accommodations work in college in terms of advocacy and asking for what you want, the magic formula is your documentation needs to be current. So it cannot be Ava Fickling's documentation that she had in kindergarten. It's got to be documentation that is relevant to the college environment. So you need to have it updated based upon, when they're going to college. So like during their senior year of high school, you should be getting updated documentation that will address the college environment. And it needs to be necessary, reasonable, and appropriate. Those are the 3 things that they're going to be looking for at the college disability office. So when it comes down to that kitchen, what are the reasons that it's necessary for your child to have it? Is it reasonable for them to have it to be able to address their medical need? And would it be appropriate? And where you're going to run into pushback is if dining services can provide safe foods for your child. And so, we live in an amazing world at Friends for Life. And I cannot tell you how many times I have said to my Fiffles, why can't we just live like in FFL City or like Camp FFL all the time? Just with these people like that are on this webinar tonight, and just with our tribe, where everything is carb counted by our dietitians at FFL, where everything is like a perfect environment. But, I think that there's a possibility that kitchen request could be denied if the dining services group comes back and says, we will provide you accurate carb counts. We will provide you food, that is gluten-free, or that is, prepared in a kitchen that is free from some of these other allergens. And so I think that that's one that you really are going to have to make sure that you address the real reasons for why they need to have that, in terms of cross-contamination, and whatever the other specific reasons are. But if you'll send me an email, again, also with the ACT question for that form letter, and then with the housing request, if you'll let me know sort of what you're looking for and your reason for asking for that kitchen, I can help you with language that you probably want to get into that accommodation request.
And to follow up on what Leigh just said, she probably knows what I'm going to say. If you show up the weekend of move-in and have these requests that your child has access to a kitchen, even if it were to get approved, if the space isn't available, it's a no, because all of the spaces on campus, even if they're accommodation related, are going to be on a first come, first serve basis. And it is very unlikely that they would move another student to accommodate your student. So that's when Leigh spoke earlier about meet with every single person in every office before you get to campus and before your student enrolls, but know the names of who you need to contact and what you need to send way before you get there. That is part of the key. I had a student who needed access to certain amenities within the residence hall, and they did not tell us until they were moving in that they could not use the stairs. They were on the 7th floor. So, prior to move-in day was probably when we needed to know that. And she was lucky that nobody showed up to a room. So it's just a fun fact to tuck in the back of your mind.
Should they do
And I
that
will also
when they're
say,
enrolling? I'm sorry, I was just like, as a thought, like when you know you're going to the school, that's when you should start doing that then, right? You can't start that too soon, I think is the answer, right?
Those are questions you should ask when you are touring before you've ever decided that, because maybe there are questions that you want to ask that the answer might help you decide if this is the place for you or not. If they're like, if there's a medical emergency, we're going to call 911 and hope for the best, and the closest hospital is 50 minutes away, it might not be the school you want to go to. So, those are questions you ask on the tour.
I think that one of the things also that's really important as we're talking about college real quickly before we end our time. If you, and this, we could have a whole nother session just sort of on being the mom of a child with diabetes going to college, and, or a dad, and how much do we monitor? Do we continue to remote monitor, or do we let them fly on their own? And we had a situation at work to where there is a mom that is continuing to remote monitor, and there was an issue to where she needed to do basically a well child check, unresponsive to the alerts, in her opinion, not answering text messages, not answering the phone call. And when the individual called in to the police, the campus police, to let them know, she did not say, I think that this is a diabetic emergency. She called in to say, I've been trying to reach my son and he's not responding to my texts. So there's a big difference between I'm a mom and my son's not answering my text messages, to I am a mom of a child with diabetes. He's not responding to my text messages and he is low. That's going to get a different response to campus police rather than just my son's not answering me. And so I think that, again, as you think about sort of going forward, think about the language that you're going to use. That's really important.
But with police, when you say that, right, like you think about if someone's in the diabetic gets pulled over and they're in a severe low or a severe high, it might seem like they're drunk. Right. So I think that's also, I know it's not totally in line with what we're talking about, but I think, if they don't know, they don't know. Right. So I think you want to think about that when you're in college, where drinking, I'm heard it happens, but it's something you want to also give them those tools and how to communicate. And maybe it's some kind of, besides a bracelet or whatever, because, but there must be something for that. Right. Matt and Leigh, is there something that that maybe it's a card? I don't know.
So I will say from that perspective, advocating for your child is not just to other people. It's advocating for your child to be responsible and do what they need to do. Sometimes that at the post-secondary level, that is sometimes the issue itself.
I didn't mean the one who's drunk. I meant like, let's say everything's going, just having a bad diabetes day, right? And that happens, and we shouldn't be driving if we're feeling like that. That's for sure. But it's off topic.
No. I'd say that is one of the things, and I think that's what I mean. Like, advocate for your child to know when they shouldn't be, but also they sell those stickers that you can put on the car windows on the sides that say, I have type 1 diabetes. They're like, baby on board, but diabetes on board, so that if a police officer walks up to the driver's door and sees that sticker on the window, they can like point at it, or whatever. They may not know. It may not mean that the police officer knows what that means, but there's a good there's one question that popped up, and I'm going to say it's probably Leigh already kind of addressed it. So probably our last thing for the night. We only have one nurse in our school district. My son has missed lunchtime and class time waiting on the nurse to make it to his school. The doctor wrote in school orders that anyone could monitor his BG and check and provide, give a shot. During the 504 meeting, the nurse informed us that only she could do this. This happens about 2 times a week. Is there a way we can work with the nurse to make sure he is not missing out on lunch and friends with class time? And Leigh, I'll let you respond. I'm not going to read your response.
I just wrote back and said that, normally schools will have several people that will be trained to administer those duties in case if the nurse is absent for some reason. So I would advocate for a backup to help perform those duties. So that way your child can go back to friend time and class time. So I would definitely go back and advocate for there to be a backup, especially where this has continued to happen. And especially where you have it in the doctor's orders, that it does not have to be the nurse to be able to perform that. I would definitely go back and suggest that they designate a backup to be able to assist with that.
Thank you. And then one last comment. The college student needs to be the one who goes to the disability office. Priority registration has been great for my daughter. And yes, when we say, your student advocating for your child and them advocating for themselves, being able to have that elevator speech of like, hi, my name is Ava Fickling and I have type 1 diabetes and I need X, Y, and Z will take them a long way in life. Any last words of wisdom, Jeff or Leigh, before we go?
No, I think just make sure you keep focused on what's important here, right? Giving them the best tools to live their life. And that's really what we're talking about. And to not educate people, but help people help them is what I would say. We always try to make it other people's decision to help you, right? So you can't force them. And that's what I would try to do.
And I would say you can do this and we've got your back. Reach out if you need us.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Leigh and Jeff, for being here with me tonight and for joining us for Fall Friends for Life 2021. Thank you, audience, for being here tonight. As a friendly reminder, this is the last week of our 100 Years of Us campaign, which recognizes and celebrates the 100th anniversary of the discovery of insulin. We have a $25,000 challenge so that a donor has offered us $25,000 if we can get 100 people to donate at least $25 to us this week. If you're interested in rising to the CWD challenge and giving your $25, you can do so now at cwd.is /100 challenge, but I'm going to make it easier and I'm going to drop it into the chat for you. That way you can just go directly to it and then you can do it before you go to bed. All right. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email. You can reach us at info@childrenwithdiabetes.com. This session will be online sometime next week. And we look forward to seeing you tomorrow at tomorrow's sessions. Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.
Night, guys. Thank you.